Have you ever felt a friend smile at your success, yet sensed something colder hiding behind their eyes? It is not the kind of hostility you can point to, no cruel word spoken, no overt betrayal, just a pause too long before applause, a congratulation that sounds like it has been rehearsed, or the faint shadow that crosses their face when your joy outshines their own. Jealousy between friends is rarely a thunderclap. It is a whisper, subtle enough to make you question if you imagined it, corrosive enough to leave a mark on the bond you thought was unshakable. You remember the first time you shared good news with someone you trusted, expecting warmth, only to receive something hollow in return. It is in those moments that you begin to understand that friendship is not always the sanctuary you were promised. Beneath the surface, there can be a quiet war, a war where envy disguises itself as support, where love is tainted by comparison, and where closeness becomes the stage for hidden resentments. Psychologists have long observed that jealousy is not an enemy born from distance, but from proximity. You do not envy the stranger walking on the other side of the world. You envy the one who stands closest, whose life mirrors your own, whose victories highlight what you fear you lack. Neuroscience shows that the same brain circuits that light up with joy when you succeed can, in another, ignite with discomfort when it is your success they witness. To the jealous friend, your triumph does not feel like a shared celebration. It feels like a mirror exposing their wounds. The danger lies not only in their feelings, but in the way they hide them. Jealousy wears a mask, smiling as it whispers doubts, offering advice laced with subtle discouragement, pretending to celebrate while quietly praying for your stumble. And you, sensing something unspoken, begin to shrink yourself, hesitate before sharing your happiness, afraid of dimming what light your friend has left. This is why jealousy in friendship cuts deeper than ordinary rivalry. A rival's envy is expected, a friend's envy is betrayal. It tells you that the safe space you believed in was never as solid as you thought. And yet, this is not a story about villains, it is a story about wounds. Jealousy is not always born from malice, but from pain, from the desperate fear of being left behind, unseen or unloved. So the question is not only why your friend envies you, but why jealousy finds a home in the very place where trust should live. And to answer that, we must look backward into the first places where comparison began, back to the roots of childhood, where the seeds of envy were first planted. When does jealousy first slip into your life? Not in adulthood, when careers and relationships compete for space, but much earlier, when you are still a child, learning what it means to be seen. Imagine two siblings at the kitchen table. One holds up a drawing, messy lines stitched together into something fragile but full of heart. The parent smiles, but their eyes drift toward the other child, whose picture looks neater, brighter, more polished. Praise flows in one direction, silence in the other. To the child left waiting for approval, the silence feels like a verdict. You are not enough, and in that silence, the seed of jealousy is planted. Children learn quickly that love and attention are not always given freely. Sometimes they feel earned, won through achievement, beauty, obedience. You notice that when you excel, the world smiles, and when you stumble, the warmth recedes. Attachment theory tells us that when love feels conditional, the child's bond with their caregivers becomes insecure, fragile, coloured with fear. They begin to scan the room for threats, searching for signs of favouritism, comparing themselves endlessly with those closest to them. The monster of jealousy is born not from hatred, but from hunger for validation, for reassurance, for the unshakable knowledge that you matter. In school, the comparisons only deepen. Report cards become scoreboards, friendships become arenas of competition. You may remember the ache of hearing your classmate praised for the same effort you gave, only to have yours overlooked. Neuroscience reveals how sensitive the developing brain is to these hierarchies. The dopamine that floods a child's system when praised becomes the very chemical that leaves them restless when ignored. The brain learns to equate recognition with survival and invisibility with danger. The tragedy is that children do not yet have the language to understand what is happening. Instead, they feel it as a shadow that follows them. The quiet resentment of being unseen, the sting of comparison, the loneliness of believing love is finite and already spoken for. They begin to look at others not as companions, but as rivals, not as mirrors, but as measuring sticks. And so, long before adulthood, jealousy has taken root not as a conscious choice, but as a survival instinct. You carry it forward unknowingly, woven into your sense of self, shaping how you measure your worth. What begins as a child's silent ache becomes the adult's hidden wound. The jealous friend you encounter later in life is not born in the moment of your success. They are shaped by years of standing in the shadows of someone else's light. The question then becomes, how does this wounded child learn to grow up? How does the silent seed of comparison evolve into the smiling mask that adulthood demands? What happens to the child who grows up in the shadow of comparison? They do not leave those wounds behind. They carry them, concealed beneath polished smiles and rehearsed laughter. As an adult, they learn to wear the mask of loyalty, a face that beams at your victories, a voice that congratulates you, a presence that appears supportive. Yet, behind the mask, there is a shadow, a quiet flicker of resentment, a whispered wish that you might stumble just once, so the scales between you might balance again. You've likely felt it, the unease when a friend's words and their eyes don't quite match. You tell them about your promotion, and though they nod and smile, their voice carries the faintest sharpness, like a blade hidden in velvet. Or you share the story of a new relationship, and they mutter something about how these things never last, leaving you unsettled, your joy suddenly fragile. Their jealousy does not arrive in explosions. It arrives in pauses, in half-hearted embraces, in the subtle art of withholding. Psychologists describe this as displacement, the unhealed child directing their old pain onto new targets. The adult jealous friend doesn't consciously decide to envy you. Their nervous system has been trained to interpret your success as their failure. Neuroscience shows how the brain's reward pathways, activated when you receive praise, can simultaneously activate threat responses in someone close to you. It is as though your happiness shines a spotlight on their emptiness, and instead of stepping into their own growth, they attempt to dim your light. The betrayal lies in the intimacy. Strangers may envy you, but their distance keeps you safe. Friends, however, are allowed into your private world, your fears, your dreams, your fragile beginnings. When their jealousy seeps into that space, it feels like poison in the well. The very place you sought refuge becomes contaminated, leaving you questioning not only them, but yourself. And yet, the jealous friend rarely sees themselves as cruel. They often believe they are protecting you, keeping you grounded, or offering honesty. In truth, they are defending their own fragile self-image, wearing the mask of care while secretly praying for your misstep. It is not open hostility that wounds the deepest, but the quiet sabotage, the absence of true celebration, the shadow that turns closeness into suspicion. So you learn to scan the faces around you, to wonder which smiles are genuine and which conceal hidden storms. Jealousy does not destroy friendship in one blow, it erodes it grain by grain until trust collapses into silence. And still, this shadow is not random, it is shaped by deeper forces in the mind, forces that psychology and neuroscience have tried to map. To understand why envy clings so tightly to human relationships, you must look beyond the mask and into the very architecture of the brain itself. Why is it that your friend's success can sometimes feel like your own failure? Why does joy in someone else's life twist into unease inside your chest? Psychology has long suggested that the answer is not simply bad character, but something deeper, something written into the wiring of the human mind. In the 1950s, Leon Festinger introduced social comparison theory, the idea that you constantly measure yourself against others in order to understand who you are. This instinct is not optional. It operates beneath awareness like a silent algorithm scanning the world. When your friend celebrates a promotion, your brain doesn't only hear their story, it quietly asks, where does that leave me? Am I behind? Am I less? What should be a moment of connection becomes a mirror reflecting inadequacy. Neuroscience has revealed how intimate this process island. Studies on mirror neurons, cells in the brain that activate both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else do it, show how deeply you are wired to feel others' experiences as your own. These neurons allow you to empathize, but they also make you vulnerable. When you see someone close to you succeed, part of your brain rehearses that success as if it belongs to you. And when you realize it doesn't, the glow of empathy curdles into envy. Even the amygdala, the brain's ancient threat detector, plays its part. It does not distinguish between physical danger and emotional threat. To the jealous mind, your friend's achievement can feel like an attack on survival, a reminder that resources, love, or recognition might be slipping away. This is not rational, yet it is primal. Evolution carved it into you, because for early humans, being outshone could mean exclusion, and exclusion could mean death. Modern research on envy paints it as a paradoxical emotion, both motivating and corrosive. A mild sting of envy can push you to grow, to chase what you admire, but when left unchecked, it festers, turning the other person into an enemy, not because of what they have done, but because of what they represent. In friendships, this evolutionary response goes awry. Instead of uniting you with those closest, it silently divides, making their joy your wound, their light your shadow. This is why jealousy feels so haunting. It is not foreign but familiar, not external but internal. It is your own brain betraying you, turning connection into competition, intimacy into rivalry. And so, the jealous friend is not simply malicious. They are trapped in a biological script, one written long before they knew your name. But what happens when this script is left unchallenged? What becomes of a friendship where envy is allowed to grow unchecked? The answer lies in the dark shadow it casts, the quiet destruction that transforms closeness into hostility. What happens when the quiet envy of a friend is left to grow unchecked? It does not remain a whisper. It transforms, slowly, into something sharper, something that gnaws at the very foundation of trust. Friendship becomes a house where every wall hides a knife, where laughter fills the air but cuts linger beneath the surface. You sit across from someone who knows your secrets, and yet you feel an unease as though each word you share might one day be turned against you. Jealousy corrodes from within. At first, it shows itself in small fractures. The passive-aggressive comment disguised as humour, the subtle dismissal of your achievements, the half-hearted embrace that feels colder than silence. But left unacknowledged, it grows bolder. It spreads into gossip, quiet sabotage, even betrayal. The friend who once celebrated your triumphs now recounts your flaws to others, not because they hate you, but because your light has become unbearable in their darkness. The paradox is haunting. Jealousy is not born of hatred, but of longing. The jealous friend wants to be close, to share in your world, to feel what you feel. Yet, they resent the very intimacy they crave. Every success of yours becomes a reminder of their own wounds. Every moment of happiness, a mirror of what they believe they lack. And so they cling to you while secretly resenting you, loving the bond while poisoning it drop by drop. Carl Jung described this as the shadow, the hidden, unacknowledged parts of the self projected outward. The jealous friend sees in you what they cannot accept in themselves. Your talents become a reminder of their wasted potential, your joy a spotlight on their emptiness. They cannot confront their own shadow, so they cast it onto you, making you the villain in a story that was never yours to begin with. The emotional toll is devastating. You begin to sense the shift, to doubt the sincerity of every compliment, to wonder if the person beside you is truly for you or silently against you. Loneliness seeps in, not because you are without friends, but because one of them has turned into a stranger with a familiar face. Betrayal wrapped in intimacy wounds, deeper than open hostility ever could. And yet, beneath this hostility lies something tragic. Jealousy is a cry for love twisted into resentment. It is the hunger of someone who cannot believe they are enough, and so they claw at the ones who remind them of it. Friendship, once a refuge, becomes a battlefield of shadows. But jealousy does not grow in isolation. It is fed, nurtured, and rewarded by the very world we live in. To understand how envy survives so easily in human bonds, you must step beyond the personal and look at the cultural scripts that teach comparison as a way of life. Have you noticed how the world itself seems designed to turn friends into rivals? You grow up learning that life is a race, that worth is measured not by who you are, but by how you compare. School rankings, gold stars, report cards. These are the first lessons in competition, and they quietly teach you that to be second is to be invisible. Even in friendship, this message lingers, whispering that affection is never enough unless it is accompanied by achievement. As you grow older, the stage becomes larger and the spotlight more merciless. Society glorifies titles, wealth, beauty, and status, while loyalty and quiet kindness remain unrewarded. The myth of the good friend tells you that you must always smile, always cheer, always celebrate. Yet in reality, society celebrates not the one who supports, but the one who climbs higher. And so, even within the bonds of friendship, comparison becomes survival, a silent tally of who is rising and who is falling. Social media magnifies this wound until it becomes unbearable. You scroll through reels of filtered lives, where every smile is perfected, every vacation polished, every friendship staged as a brand. Your closest friend posts a picture of their success, and suddenly it is not just their triumph, but a performance for the entire world. Neuroscience tells us that constant exposure to these curated realities activates the brain's comparison circuits relentlessly, leaving you caught between admiration and resentment. It is no longer enough to live, you must display, and in that performance, jealousy finds endless fuel. The culture of envy is not accidental, it is profitable. Entire industries thrive on your longing, convincing you that you are always behind, always lacking, always less than someone else. The jealous friend is not merely a product of personal wounds, but of a world that has been teaching them since childhood that worth is scarce, that success cannot be shared, that love itself is conditional upon staying ahead. And so friendship, once imagined as a sanctuary, becomes another arena of performance. You are expected to clap, but also to compete, to support, but also to prove. It is a contradiction that corrodes trust, because no one can be both wholly supportive and endlessly measured at the same time. The result is a culture where friends smile at each other while secretly calculating who has more love, more recognition, more life. Perhaps the deeper tragedy is this: friendship, in its purest form, is supposed to transcend survival. It is meant to be the one space untouched by the hunger of comparison. And yet, in a world that feeds envy at every turn, even love between friends is not safe. But what happens to the human heart when it is forced to live this way? When every bond is stained by rivalry and every success becomes a silent wound? The answer lies in the emotional toll, the deep, invisible scars left behind by envy's slow erosion. What is the true cost of jealousy in friendship? It is not only the crack in trust or the silence after celebration. It is the slow erosion of two human hearts, each carrying wounds the other cannot see. For the jealous friend, the poison runs inward first. Every smile they force, every shadow of envy they hide becomes a burden of shame. They live in constant tension, torn between love and resentment, longing for closeness while drowning in comparison. The anxiety is relentless, whispering that they are less, that they will always stand in someone else's light. Over time, that whisper becomes self-loathing, and the mask they wear begins to suffocate them. For you, the one who is envied, the wound takes a different form. It is confusion, the unsettling sense that your joy is dangerous, that every success might cost you affection. You hesitate before sharing good news, rehearsing, in your mind, how to downplay it, how to make it sound smaller than it island. You shrink yourself, not out of humility, but out of fear of losing the person you thought was safe. And in that shrinking, a subtle grief takes root. The grief of realizing that trust has withered, that celebration is no longer shared, that you are more alone than you thought. Cinematic moments unfold in the quiet. The message left unanswered after you post an achievement. The friend who suddenly avoids your calls. The laughter that once felt warm but now feels rehearsed. Neuroscience tells us that betrayal and social rejection light up the same pain centers in the brain as physical injury. This is why a poisoned bond feels like being burned from within, because your body cannot distinguish between emotional abandonment and actual harm. The ache is real, the wound cellular. Depression, insecurity, and broken identities grow from this soil. The jealous friend wonders why they cannot simply be happy for someone they love, and in that wondering, they despise themselves. The envied friend questions why their joy feels like a crime, and in that questioning, they doubt their worthiness of genuine connection. Two lives unravel in parallel, not through violence, but through silence, hesitation, and the invisible weight of envy. The tragedy is that jealousy destroys both sides of the bond. One is consumed by resentment, the other by betrayal. What could have been a refuge turns into a battlefield of shadows, where intimacy is laced with suspicion and every smile is questioned. Friendship, which should heal the wounds of life, becomes another wound to carry. But the story does not end here. Even poisoned soil can be healed if tended to with honesty and care. The question is, can envy be transformed? Can the monster within be faced, not denied, and turned into something that fosters growth rather than destruction? The path toward that transformation begins with courage. The courage to unmask jealousy and confront it directly. Is jealousy destined to destroy every bond it touches, or can it be transformed into something that heals rather than corrodes? The truth is haunting but hopeful. Envy does not have to remain a monster in the shadows. It can become a teacher, pointing you toward the wounds you have not yet faced, the insecurities you have long tried to bury. Transformation begins not with denial, but with awareness the moment you admit, yes, I feel envy, and instead of shrinking from it, you hold it up to the light. For the jealous friend, the path begins within. Psychology reminds us that emotions unacknowledged do not disappear, they harden, turning into resentment. But emotions confronted can soften. To feel jealousy is to glimpse the part of yourself that believes it is unworthy. Through practices like journaling, you can trace its roots back to the childhood table, where your drawing was overlooked, back to the classroom where you felt unseen. Each reflection becomes a thread leading you to the source, showing you that the envy was never truly about your friend, but about the part of you that still aches for love without conditions. Shadow work, as Jung described, is the courage to meet what you have rejected in yourself. When you allow envy to surface without judgment, you begin to see it not as a curse, but as a compass. It points to the areas of life where you hunger to grow. Admiration, after all, is envy purified. What once felt like bitterness can be reframed into inspiration. The recognition that another's light does not dim yours, but reveals what is possible. Success is not a scarce flame, it is a fire that multiplies when shared. For the one who is envied, healing takes another shape. It is about boundaries and discernment, about learning which friendships can be nurtured and which must be released. To constantly dim your joy is to betray yourself, and no friendship is worth that sacrifice. Protecting your spirit does not mean abandoning compassion. It means choosing truth over performance, honesty over poisoned silence. Sometimes, the most loyal act toward yourself is to walk away from the shadow that refuses to transform. Neuroscience shows that gratitude and self-compassion reshape the brain, strengthening pathways of resilience. When both friends engage in this work, one through honesty with themselves, the other through protection of their own light, the poisoned bond can become fertile ground for growth. Jealousy, alchemized, becomes a mirror that reflects possibility rather than lack. And so, envy does not have to end the story. It can begin a new one where pain becomes awareness, where rivalry gives way to mutual growth, and where friendship is no longer a battlefield but a shared sanctuary. Yet, even with healing, the shadow of jealousy reminds us of a deeper truth about human nature. It forces us to ask, what does it mean to be truly loyal, not only to others but to ourselves? The answer lies in philosophy's timeless reflection on the fragile beauty of trust. What does it mean to call someone a true friend? Not simply a companion in laughter, not merely a presence in your life, but someone who can look at your success, your joy, your light, and feel no threat, only warmth. A jealous friend is a mirror of our own wounds, reflecting back the parts of humanity that ache with insecurity, that still carry the shadows of childhood comparisons. But a loyal friend, one who can celebrate you as if your light is also theirs, is rare, fragile, and worth protecting with the same reverence you would give to your own heart. You already know how delicate trust can be. It takes years to build, and only a moment to fracture. A friend who envies you reminds you of the vulnerability of human connection, of how quickly affection can become rivalry when touched by scarcity. And yet, it also reveals why true friendship is so extraordinary. In a world that constantly teaches you to compete, to compare, to measure worth in fragments, the friend who chooses love over envy is a quiet miracle. They remind you that joy can be shared, that light does not need to be divided, that what is celebrated multiplies rather than diminishes. Philosophers through the ages have warned that envy is the most corrosive of emotions, not because it only harms the other, but because it devours the self. It chains you to bitterness, making another person's life your prison. Friendship at its best is liberation, the release of comparison, the freedom to be wholly yourself without fear of judgment. To stand beside someone and rejoice in their light as though it were your own is one of the most radical acts of love you can offer. And so the choice before you is both simple and profound. You can remain bound to the shadow, to the monster of jealousy that distorts closeness into rivalry. Or you can choose to cultivate the fragile beauty of loyalty, the rare kind of friendship that does not falter in the face of another's brightness, but instead grows stronger because of it. The truth is this: every bond you hold will be tested by the spectre of envy. Some will shatter under its weight. Others, if nurtured with honesty and compassion, will survive and even deepen. And when you find that rare friend who celebrates you without condition, who carries no shadow behind their smile, you will know you have encountered something sacred. Perhaps this is the final lesson. Jealousy teaches us that true friendship is not measured in how often someone stands beside you, but in how sincerely they can stand behind you, even when your light outshines their own. Protect that loyalty, cherish it. For in a world that feeds envy, a loyal friend is not just a companion, they are proof that love can endure even the shadows.